Hey, welcome to the Tradie Success Podcast. On this podcast, you're going to hear real life stories from trade business owners to minimize the mistakes you're going to make, maximize profit, create more time freedom, and minimize emotional overwhelm. So hit subscribe and follow us now and enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the Tradie Success Podcast. Here with Ben Doran on our second podcast from Blitz Air. Ben, it's awesome having you back on the show, man.
Hey, Greggy boy, good to be back, mate. Fair bit's going on in the last 12 months since we last had a chat, so it'll be good to unwind.
Yeah, man. So your podcast has helped so many people, join the academy, get support, and they, even in the previous podcast we've recently done, they've brought up your name. They're name dropping you, man.
I've been a bit slack on listening to the podcast, but I seen one of the other aircon guys had been on a podcast, and I thought, I'll just jump onto that. And then I was midway through the walk when he dropped me name, and I nearly tripped over. I thought, Jesus. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. I sort of had a fair idea that the impact it was having, because the amount of people that sort of messaged me through the academy asking for sort of advice on how I did grow so quickly, and a lot of them do say the same thing, that from that podcast it sort of gave them that push to jump in. So it's sort of, yeah, I guess in a sense it makes me feel sort of pretty proud that I was able to show a bit of that vulnerability at the start to push other guys into taking the leap, and no doubt helped a lot of guys out that were on the fence.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You opening up in that last podcast and talking about the tough times, because it's so common, and it's so, like, I've been through it all. You've been through it. All of the listeners have probably felt some level of, overwhelm, and the more vulnerable we are, it helps people feel like they're not the only ones. And that's what's happened here. And people have come in realizing that they don't have to continue doing it the hard way. There is a way out. And that's what I'm so proud about, what we've done and what you've done and actually continued to do. So this podcast is all about a continuation from the previous one, which is, a year ago, you were just about to go to Europe for 5 weeks and leave your business running under the ops management of your ops manager, your admin, and the team that you had built over the 9 months before from a subcontractor. So that was a serious growth curve, and we were able to get there just in time for that Europe trip. So how was the Europe trip?
Yeah, it was good. Like the support leading in from you guys was second to none, and that was probably the first time since I started my business that I really got to switch off and had an epic trip, carried on like a pork chop for most of it. I only ended up having one phone call the whole 5 weeks, and that was initiated by me about three weeks in. I sort of just wanted to just put myself at ease a little bit while I was on my sail Croatia. Reached out to the team, and everything was smooth sailing while I was sort of away. So it was an unreal experience, and like even that lesson, there's a lot that's changed since then, but just planning that Europe trip has literally changed so much about my whole business, my growth. It was the best thing I did.
Yeah, and I think having that set in stone event that's coming up that you've paid for it, you can't get away from it, so you have to make some choices and take action within the business, allowed you to continue to prepare for and get ready for the trip. And that's how, we were able to go, well, let's get an ops manager in a couple of months before, so that, at least they've got some training and some development before you go away. And you're able to go and without that, imagine the trip if you had 1 or 2 tradies and just yourself running everything.
Yeah, you just couldn't do it. Like you couldn't get away and have a trip like that. You'd end up just spending most of your time on the phone. So that's something I'm really grateful for. The one thing that people, I guess, when they first get into business, they probably don't realise how full on the first few years are. And, well, I should say without help, as I said, from day dot, when I did it on my own, it was I chose the hard road, and the 2 years that I've been with the academy now, it's sort of polar opposites from that stage. But that's the hard thing when you start a business. Those first few years, you're every point of call, and that was the biggest regret. The one regret that I always had, I really wanted to do that Europe trip. So the fact that I got to do that and only have one phone call in that 5 weeks was sort of like a dream come true. And like I remember afterwards reaching out to you, sort of letting you know how grateful I was for your help to get me to that point. And it's definitely set me up for a lot more growth because I learned a shitload through that period. I'm not going to sit here and say it was all sunshine and roses because it certainly wasn't, but I wouldn't have learnt these lessons if I hadn't have done that. So that's probably the thing that I'll take the most out of it. You put yourself in that uncomfortable position and you build your team to be able to do an event like that, and it definitely opens up a lot of holes that you didn't realise were there. So it's been an interesting 12 months since.
Well, let's talk before you went away in the preparation and what you learnt. Reflecting now back to those things that you learnt with that growth curve that you had, what are some of those big things that you implemented that made the difference?
I guess prior to Europe, bringing Dylan, who at the time was my ops manager, bringing him in for sort of 2.5 months leading in. At the time, I spoke about the effect that had with just the workflow that it created for us, because I had another set of eyes, another set of hands helping me with quoting, helping me with invoicing, those sorts of things. That opened my eyes a lot. But I guess leading into Europe, it was all about trying to hand over a lot of the communication from clients, my real estate agents, my builders and things like that. That was a little bit of a tricky transition that I didn't think was possible. And after that, I learned that very quickly it is possible, and the only way you can grow that business is to have someone else answer those phone calls, because if you let that consume you, you'll never sleep. Builders like us, they're busy throughout the day, and they like to text and ring you at 6 o'clock at night when you're trying to switch off. Moving a lot of that responsibility to someone that they know is a worker within the business, then they make time throughout the day. They don't rely on sort of pushing you after hours. And I think that's the evolution of business. You start to get to a point where you don't have that 24/7 phone access. It becomes a bit more of a structured process.
The thing is, like, to get to that stage, though, we've got to build your team of tradespeople to bring in enough billable hours to pay for those non-billable staff. So your administration, your ops manager, and there's definitely a reservation from most tradespeople, even to put on their first tradie for one, but then to put on an admin, to put on an ops manager, feeling like I won't have enough work, I won't have enough money. Can you speak to the impact each of those key hires made? Because we've designed our program in the academy. If anyone that hasn't heard of the new curriculum we've rolled out, is around those ceilings you hit where you're just overwhelmed with the amount of workload you got, and those key hires are the answer. So just to help our members understand the impact of actually putting on an admin, putting on an ops manager had on your business.
Naturally, as a business owner, you think that you're the ultimate person for any role within your business, and as you start to hire people, it really hits you hard that you're no longer the king of quoting, you're no longer the king of scheduling and things like that, because as your business grows, when you put these staff on, their sole responsibility takes that role. Or for instance, Jackson, who now is my full-time estimator, the effect that's had on the business, when at the start you sort of go, how am I going to afford to pay my best guy $100,000 salary to come completely off the tools into an estimating role? You just, at the time, you just think it's not possible unless you put 4 or 5 more tradies on. The lesson I've learnt through that period is you bring in a guy in that doesn't have the emotion that I have when it comes to winning work and always wanting to get that job so that it keeps the guys busy. He's come into a role where it's around, here's your margin, here's your gross profit margin we have to hit, and providing you hit that, we make good money. Whereas I would always tinker at trying to drop pricing, trying to win the job. And like that's only a small lesson, but that there increases your profit margin so you don't have to win every job. And that's the reality. Like that, it's an emotional decision for me to do that, where most business owners would relate. They'd go, well, I've got the power to reduce it. Jackson doesn't have the authority to reduce it below that bottom line unless he comes to me. So, but even in that hire, I've got someone that's responding to our quote requests every day. Any new inquiries come through. So we're getting to probably 300% more site inspections, and we're winning a lot more quotes at a better profit margin. So you look at that, like that in a sense, 6 months ago, I would have said there's no way I can do it. Now we're in a position where Jackson has taken the full quoting off me. I'm now so much less under pressure and stressed, whilst we're building the process alongside his new role. It's allowed us to potentially put on another 3 to 4 tradies by putting him into that role. So that there's a lesson for anyone that, as I've said from day dot, if you put the guy into the position, or you put a new tradie on, you will create the workflow, or you'll create that space to move into.
Just so everyone knows like where you are now. So 18 months ago, you put on your first tradesperson, and what's your team look like now?
Yeah, so 18 months ago was when Dill started, and now we've got, as of last week, I think we've got 14 on the books now. So it's been, it's. I feel like every month there's someone new starting, which is, it's as you were sort of saying before about that fear of hiring. Once you see the results of hiring, it no longer becomes a fear. It's more about, geez, how could I find someone to fit into this role that'll open up an extra 2 or 3 roles? And that's sort of where we're at now. It's a real exciting time for me because of the base that I've built in the office now. We're very top heavy in the office, but that was my focus to really build a core group that we could have a really good process that once that's nailed, it'll allow us to probably put on 4 or 5 new technicians, or billable assets, as we call them, which will explode the company without requiring any more non-billable resources.
But even on that, like I'm the same. Like we'll always try and create the space that's going to generate that workflow. But if we didn't, a lot of people think the other way around, and I did for so long as well, as I'm sure you did, which is like, when I get enough work, then I'll put on the non-billable, or when I get enough work, then I'll do that. So, and that's what holds everyone back. And because of that, we don't grow, because we get stuck in limbo land. And so, yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's just that fear, isn't it? You worry, but like anyone that goes into business knows, the minute you're put in a position and your back's against the wall, you'll fight your way out. So that's the way that I ended up looking at it. Get myself into a position where I had 2 guys sitting around, and I guarantee I'll have work for them the next week. And that's just the way any good business person sort of is. So that's why it's anyone that sort of says they don't have enough work for another guy, put him on, and I guarantee you'll find it.
Yeah. And just look at the times where you've been quiet and you've been able to get yourself busy again. It's no different when you hire someone and create that exact same environment. Like we don't have enough work, and you'll go get it.
Yeah, and I find now that it's actually more pressuring to me when we've got too much work with not enough assets. That's when I start to feel the pinch, because I'm like, right, we need to get more guys because I want to continue to grow. So it's sort of that mindset has really switched over the last 18 months for me.
No, that's cool. So over the last year, what have you learned? You got back from Europe. What are the big key takeaways, the big lessons? Tell us about what it's looked like for you. What's the year look like?
I'll start off with the negatives, I guess. So I got back from Europe and obviously settled back in. I guess in a sense, the business handled things okay with me gone, and it wasn't like I came back to an absolute shitstorm. It was sort of like, oh, everything sort of moved pretty cruisily without me. The biggest lessons I learnt was probably really structuring that ops role and the office processes at that point, where we got a little bit quiet through that period. So at the time, my ops manager sort of wasn't, he didn't want to annoy me, which was the whole sort of premise of him to come in. So we sort of got a bit quiet. He lowered pricing to try and win work to get the guys busy and things like that. The flow-on effect after I got back, it wasn't so much the month that I was away, but it was the following month after that when we were winning the work, but it sort of wasn't at the margins we needed to hit. That was sort of the biggest effect I took, with realising that, all right, we really need to build some structure around this process, and we need to work on that a bit more, so when I do sort of step back a bit, that won't happen again. And then I actually had a wedding in America booked for late October, so it was going to be a 2-week zip over there for a wedding. Yeah, as I said, it's not all sunshine and roses, but about 3 weeks before the wedding, my ops manager, who still is a good mate of mine, but he was the guy that obviously started with me from scratch. He texted me on a Friday night. I was just getting home. He texted me on a Friday night and said that he was pulling the pin and going to go out on his own and just subby. That was probably I reckon that was one of the toughest days I've had or nights I've had in my whole business journey. Like, I mean, there's been some tough nights, but yeah, I actually went home that night and I just broke down in tears. It was pretty grim, and it was sort of like more, this is a not necessarily him, but as in when you put so much of your effort and your trust, and this is a guy that I had massive plans for in the business to help him, or to take the business to a new level and bring him along for the ride. He was the guy that had been there from day dot. It was sort of like I actually felt like I'd gone through a bit of a breakup. It was pretty tough. You don't realize how much your business has an effect on your life. Like, I mean, that there, to me, I never ever would have thought would ever, like, I mean, as a guy, it's not very often you break down in tears or whatever, but that night that was really tough. And the following sort of 4 to 6 weeks after that, I was really, really questioning whether I wanted to continue on in business. And it sort of just felt to me that the loyalty these days, and it's not so much loyalty, because Dill is still one of my good mates, and he was so loyal to me. He gave me what I wanted, but I also learned a shitload in that point that he was put into a role to practically take my role over, and it showed me that as a business owner, it's not easy for anyone to just come in and play that role. So from that point, after I really sort of sat down, I remember coming to you and saying, righto, I need to change things a bit. Like, I genuinely sat in a 4 to 6 week period where I was like, I lost a lot of motivation. I was sort of like, nah. I went and got a business evaluation. Like, it got to that point, and it's just not in my nature to sort of walk away from something that I built. So I remember coming to you, and that's when we sort of sat down and nutted out that ops manager role, and we did that outside hire. So from that point on, I put the saddle back on, jumped back on the horse, and I was like, righto, let's have a real good crack. And my plan from that point in, I wrote a bit of an 18 month to 2 year plan of where I want to take the business and potentially get it to a saleable asset by the end of next financial year, so end of 2025 financial year. That was the plan. So we I obviously went out and did the Seek hire. The support you gave me through that was second to none. Even coming in even coming into that interview with me to sort of narrow down the last three, and then deciding from that point. We got Daniel in. So Daniel stepped in. He came through, and this was a good lesson for me. He came from a company where he'd been a service manager for 12 years. He came with a lot more experience. He was able to handle the role a little bit more because of around that team management. Bit of an older guy, 38, and I just thought, yeah, it's funny how everything happens for a reason. In that point where Dill was a gun, there was aspects that sort of he didn't have experience with. He hadn't managed a team before. He hadn't disciplined guys, and that sort of me and him were on that same level. We're just a couple of young guys that have been really good at our trade. So yeah, bringing Daniel in brought a lot of a wealth of knowledge, and we were able to grow the team by another 2 by bringing him in. So we got through the summer. The summer was pretty hectic as usual in our trade. Before I think I messaged you and I said, I think I want to put on a general manager, and that was based around that sale of the business. So I'd done some research, listened to a few podcasts, and just realised that no business is of value to anyone if the director's in there for 60 hours or 40 hours a week even. And I just thought everyone around me except you were telling me that you're not ready for a general manager. What's a general manager going to do? And I knew that I'd made my mind up, but if I was going to go to anyone that was going to push me over the edge, it was going to be you. So we started the process of the general manager. At that point, I'd really fired up. I'd took 10 weeks off grog, really fired up with fitness, and I started the general manager process of hiring. And yeah, had 168 applicants. So you could imagine.
Wow.
You could imagine for a guy like me, I was sifting through applications from blokes that have been the CEO at Schnitz, people that had ran massive companies. It completely opened my eyes to the people out there that are willing to take on a role, and I just never understood it. I was real sort of like, why are these guys applying for my role? And going through the interview process, it became really clear how someone that's been in corporate or has been in bigger companies, the attraction to come and work for a smaller company with someone that has a lot of drive, that wants to grow. It was honestly eye-opening for me how many people were like, we just want, like, we love the drive that you've got, the goals that you've got for the business. And then, I hired Mark, who's now my general manager. He's been with us for 3 to 4 months. And I can categorically say, out of all the 14 or however many people I've hired that have come and go, he is by far the best hire I've made in my whole business. Just the level of knowledge, the support, he's come in like a father figure to me, and geez, I'm excited about business for the next few years with him by my side. It's bloody exciting. So he's come on. I've now put on a schedule coordinator, and that was probably that's the last part of my role in the office now. So this week I'm working from home 3 days a week to just purely work on a few things with the marketing and a few new opportunities, bringing more work in. That Mark's come in and he's said, righto, it's time for you to get out now. We need to sort of get the admin and the scheduler and the ops manager to start really working together without looking over their shoulder and asking you questions every 5 minutes. Yeah, the support that he's come in and just bringing that knowledge has been just, oh, mate, I look forward to getting out of bed and going to work because I'm like, it's pretty exciting time.
What a journey, man. Like, that's so exciting to hear, the progression, and for all the listeners as well that heard your first one and where you've gone to now. And there's some really important things that you said in there. I think the one big thing is like the amount of people that told you no. And I think this is the difference between a lot of the people out there giving advice at the moment. Like, they haven't got the experience in the business world to the extent that we have at the Academy. And we're able to provide that to our members. And we want everyone to live this life that you're living. It doesn't have to be as fast as you've grown, but to eventually get to the place where you are handing over responsibility to these team members, and the team members are able to provide a better service for the community. They're able to uplift other people in the trade space and construction space, to really show what's possible, and also to create a cohesive team that allows everyone to work synergistically without the business owner. And so you're talking through as well the sale, like the goal to sell the business, whether you're going to sell it or not, it's irrelevant. But to have that, it's almost like your trip to the Europe. It's this end point where you want to get it to the place where it can be sold. And so you've gone through the process of doing the things that need to happen to get you there. And I think that's, incredible that you've been able to, reduplicate what we went through in terms of like teaching you the process of like goal setting, reverse engineering, and then putting the milestones in by yourself. Like, that's something that you've been able to do because you've developed that skill now to be able to do that.
Yeah, the key point in that was at the start when I was down in the dumps, it was like, right, let's sort of look at that sale of the business in 2025 end of financial year. And by doing that and implementing the general manager and pulling away from certain roles, what that did, it rejuvenated me to the point where it's like, hang on a second, by making these moves, I'm reducing how much work I need to put into the business. So why the bloody hell would I sell it when I get it to that point? That's sort of the end goal, to get it to a point where it can run itself and you can have so much more freedom. So now in that transition, it's only been 6 months since I really sort of changed that mindset. I'm like, sell it. You'd have to bloody pry it out of my hands now if you wanted it.
Yeah.
and that's the thing. That's what it's all about. And that's what you guys have said from day dot. It's about that freedom, the Freedom Fighters Club. And yeah, I'm not going to say that it's, as I've said, there's so many ups and downs, and there's going to be shitloads more bad days and there's going to be shitloads more good days. But every time that we go through one of those bad days, now we're back on track to get to that end goal, and that's freedom.
And freedom is temporary as well. Like, and people need to understand that you've got freedom until you don't have freedom again. Like, you create freedom by putting in that key hire, and then your business grows and expands and fills the space, and you won't have freedom. So you've got to be able to have that skill set to be able to hand over responsibility when you get to that. And I want to go back to what you talked about, which is when you were really struggling, and I was like, fuck, I have to do everything I can to help Ben here. And because you're saying, I'm just going to go back and be the ops manager. I just want to go back. I want to fix all the problems. I want to go and do all the pricing properly. I want to fix the efficiency. I want to do all this stuff. I'm just going to be the ops manager again. I was like, no, don't do it. So can you talk me through like that mentality? Because I think a lot of people go there, all different types of hires.
Yeah, I remember it. I remember it vividly. Everything that I'd envisaged was like, nah, I've just got to go back. There's going to be no one. And it was depleting. Like, you lose that momentum, you lose the drive. Yeah, like at the end of the day, just because of one bad situation, and then that's why I keep saying you got to put yourself into these situations for things to go wrong. I went back into that role, and it just ended up being every morning the boys would be ringing me flat out again in the mornings, every afternoon. And I mean, as good as it's to say that I was obviously the only one that could do the role, you can only do that for so long before you can't even do the role. And that's where I suffered a bit more burnout. I think I've touched on it with you. I ended up going and doing some tests on my body and things like that. I was sort of sick all the time. I was run down and went through a pretty ordinary patch there where I sort of went and spent a fair bit of money on doing all full body tests and bloods and everything, and got the diagnosis in the end that I had adrenal fatigue, which the guy said to me, he's like, mate, if you continue down this road, you'll end up breaking down at about 40 and God knows what sort of cancers and things will happen. That sort of put a lot of that emphasis on getting the general manager and getting some support, things like that. Like a lot of guys in those roles, they continue on to do that for 15 years, and your body can only handle so much. So that there was a good lesson of like, yeah, go back into the ops role until you completely burn yourself out again, and then you're back to square one.
Happens at all levels, right? So let's talk to a couple of the different types of tradies out there. You've hired your first tradie, they work out okay, but something happens and then they end up leaving, or they weren't the right person. It's like, it's all right, I'm just going to do it myself. So I'll just keep doing it myself, and they just go back. But they go back, they've built this extra workload because they had someone, and then they go back with extra workload, which is almost like artificially high because you had support and then they're not here anymore. And so you try and wear all of it yourself. There's other times where you are the ops manager and you have 2 tradies calling sick for a week, and you're like, I'm just going to go back on the tools. So you go back on the tools as the ops manager, and then everything else is affected down the line because of that, or you had 2 key staff members leave.
Yeah, your quoting, your invoicing, your response to your good customers is then completely shot because you've gone and done a week's on the tools, and every business owner knows how that feels. It feels terrible because then you end up doing Saturday, Sundays of paperwork. It's going to happen at all points through business, but I mean, constantly hiring, like you've sort of taught me, does help alleviate those situations, because if you've always got someone around that you're trying to grow capacity for, it takes a lot of the stress out when something like that does happen.
Yeah, and the bigger you get as well, the more churn you're going to have eventually as well, because people are going to come and go, and it's just a role you've created that needs to be filled again, and it doesn't need to be filled by the business owner. And what I love about your story is it's like what I took me 7 to 10 years to do, you've done in 18 months. And it's just like a fast track of what took me a long time because I made every mistake. And what's really cool is you've got a really sharp timeline of the impact of, putting these people on, these key hires on, and it creating capacity for everyone else and outcome, like growth in your sales, growth in your number of jobs you're doing every day. And even with getting to general manager, it demonstrates like our pathway in Freedom Fighters is to create this freedom the whole way along. It's not about getting to 5 years down the track and you finally get to live this great life. It's about looking at where your time's going now and creating freedom today. But then that freedom will get filled again because your business will grow. But then you've got these real key like milestones, which is operational time freedom with an ops manager. And you can take trips, like you said, to Europe, and you can disconnect from the business, and the business will run without you. And then there's the next tier up, which is the general manager. And now the business management gets run by the general manager, and the ops manager is still there running the tradespeople and the admin team. And they're working, like you said, Mark's working with the team now to get the admin and the ops management team working cohesively with the tradespeople, so that you've got this really effective business system that's consistent, it's predictable for customers. It's everything that everyone wants their business to be, because you've got the people to be there to be able to achieve that. Whereas when you're a small business and you're getting thrown around, you are affected by your capacity, like massively.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference when someone says freedom, you get freedom. Well, freedom can be in a lot of different ways. My idea of freedom was to still be 100% in the business, but I don't have to go into the office 3 or 4 days a week. I can work from home and go and meet with clients for 2 days a week, bring in new business. That to me is freedom, even though I'm still heavily involved in the business. But that operation, as I said, when you get to that operational freedom, and then the management freedom is really that next step that I'm really keen for, to mainly, well, practically only deal directly with my general manager. Any issues goes through the process until it gets to me, and with a bit of luck, by the time it gets to me, it's already been fixed.
And you love what you do, right? And that's the same as me. Like people are like, oh, well, if you're teaching freedom. Why don't you have freedom? I have freedom. I've got 2 businesses with 2 general managers. Like the businesses run without me, but I love what I do. Like I love everything I do and I want to be a part of it. But the thing is, I get to choose what I do most of the time. There's shit like what just happened in the academy and I've got to fucking fix that for a little bit, but then I'm back out as soon as I can be.
But that's the thing. It's sort of like with what's happened with you in short period, it's no different to me with that ops manager role at that point. Like, yes, it pulls you back a little bit. You go in and you get stuck in and come back out. And I mean, yeah, freedom, as we said, but who wouldn't like going in and having hour-long podcasts with guys talking about their experience? I wouldn't exactly say that's a shit day in the office.
Working hard. Yeah.
I'd sooner that.
Although I do work fucking hard.
I'd sooner that than crawling through a roof.
Yeah. Although I love crawling through roofs. If I ever get a chance, I'll fucking monkey bar through the roof. It is enjoyable. But yeah, I've got the same thing happening right now as the leadership team's like, Greg, you just focus on that. You go over there. We've got the operation. You need to like get your fingers out of the pie, mate. Like just get over there. So
and it is hard. Yeah. It's so hard. You just want to draw yourself back into it. And I'm still at that point because I've just sort of moved out of the scheduling side of things. That was the last thing I really didn't want to let go of. But I can't help myself to just poke my nose in. And that's why having that general manager, he's the one that is saying, no, get out of the office for 3 days a week because we don't want you in here. We want them to listen, and that's why it's such an interesting thing to have someone like that in your business to tell you to piss off because they've got it under control. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. No, it's such a cool journey. What do you want to say to any tradie out there? I'd love for you to speak. Any tradie, trade business owner, like what have you got to say from your very concentrated growth, your lessons, everything that's happened? Just speak direct to them.
Get out of your comfort zone. The comfort zone, every point that you hit comfort is you just sort of you're stopping growth. I've found that every time I put myself in tricky situations or take the risk with an extra hire or do anything that I get a little bit of that adrenaline or fear about sort of making the decision, every time I come out of it, I've either learnt the hard way or I've gone, shit, I'm glad I made that decision. And I know it's easier said than done, but I mean, if you're sitting on the fence about hiring that first tradie, what's going to stop you from hiring him? And in a month's time, you've spent $6,000 on wages, and it hasn't worked out. You're not even going to be $6,000 down the hole. You're just sort of going to break even and learn a shitload of lessons. So that's my journey. That's how I've gotten to here. I've just pulled the trigger on things when I'm sort of half thinking about something, and I just find my way to learn. And that'd be the obviously it does help with the support of the Tradie Success Academy, but pulling the trigger and just putting yourself in the deep end, you will grow and you will learn a lot quicker than if you sit on the fence.
Yeah, man. And I think as well, like I remember chatting to you about another member who had left and you're like, just need to understand. You need to understand why something is happening, not being told like, oh, why don't you just go and do that? It's like, why is it actually happening? And that's the difference, you know, that when you do understand, and what I love about what you've done is that you show up, right? You show up you come to training every week, you're showing up in the community, you are, you know, helping people, you're direct messaging. And when our community does that for everyone, that's when it has the vibe that it has. So, you know, and that's what has driven a lot of your results, because it's not a matter of like, just do that. It's a lot behind the scenes around why it happens and understanding that intrinsically with the training and the experience together.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the academy is like when you do put in the time and you create a few friendships and stuff, I now work alongside 4 or 5 companies that I met through the academy. Obviously, electricians and aircon or fridgies work hand in hand a lot. So I've got a couple of really good subby companies that work under me now that I've gained through the academy. So that, like, obviously you're not going in for that reason, but it is that sort of like that community feel and the support around it.
100%. Yeah. Awesome, man. Again, congratulations. You are such a epic person, and thanks for always trusting our advice and what we say, because that's helped you get the results that you're seeing. And I'm glad I've been there along the way in the journey with you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I've got the Young Achiever of the Year award coming up in a couple of weeks. So if I nail that, I'll put it down to the academy of what you guys have done for me.
Oh, mate, how exciting. Young Achiever of the Award. Good luck. And, thanks so much, man. AM members, just reach out to Ben on the Tradies app. Let him know you heard the podcast and what you've taken away from it. And thanks again, Ben, for everything you do.
No worries, guys. Stay safe.
See you later. Hey, guys, it's Greg here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. For me, growing my trade business was extremely hard. It cost me millions of dollars, so much time trying to figure out what was the right way to do business, and emotionally feeling like I'm letting myself, my partner, and my family down by not knowing how to run my business properly. But I kept working hard and overcame those challenges and created systems and solutions that minimized those mistakes for myself and my team as we grew. Now, Response Electricians, go and Google it. We've got over 1,700 reviews on Google. We've won awards like Electrician of the Year and Service Business of the Year. I sat on the National Board of Directors for Master Electricians Australia for 2 years, created a real solid awareness of the industry and the construction industry and the challenges you face. And the business runs autonomously over in Perth while I live my life working on the academy in Byron Bay. And I help people like you create freedom from your business as well. Now, having coached and trained thousands of trade business owners, we've developed the Freedom Fighters program. It's a guided pathway in a hybrid training and coaching system that provides you with the right information and steps to take to create freedom, not in years, but now. You can actually create more freedom from your business sooner than you think. So click the link and have a free strategy session with one of our academy experts to fully understand how you can create more time freedom from your trade business, generating more profit, better culture, and more growth in less time.